Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening's exploration of Think, Learn, Succeed. We are doing chapters 5 through 7. We did chapters 1 through 4 last week. I hope you managed to get through those chapters and read them. If not, doesn't matter. Join us at any point. You can go to our, there's a coupon. You can go to our store and get the book for a reduced price. Don't forget, there's also the online program that goes with it. Think and Eat Yourself Smart, excellent online program to help you work through the book as well. It's a lot of content. For those of you that are just joining us for the first time, welcome. You can go and watch last week's YouTube live. You can get into the book and you can join us for the next few weeks as we carry on. I'm thrilled that you're back with me again. This is such an important topic, as is everything I talk about. I always say that, but it is super important to realize you have to look after your brain and your body, which are what your mind works through. Remember, you are not your brain, you control your brain. So it's just so important that you actually then control how you're eating and how important thinking is while you're eating. And that is how you're going to look after your brain and your body. So that it's a bit like taking your computer. If you throw it on the floor, your computer's not going to work very well. If you don't look after your brain and your body, your mind can't work through it very well. Now, I'm not teaching a specific diet. You can eat whichever diet you want. If you do keto or paleo or vegetarian or vegan, find whatever works for you. We are all so uniquely different. The important thing is remember the rules throughout this book that I teach and throughout all my teachings is eat real food mindfully. And last week we spoke a lot about that. Real food, I defined it for you. It's very clearly defined in chapters 1 through 4. It's pretty much unprocessed food, food that is organically grown, sustainable, farm to table, wild as possible, minimally processed food. That's what our brain and our body are designed to eat. So whatever diet you do, make sure it's real food. And then remember, 80% of eating is in your mind. Your mind controls your digestive system. So if you're in a foul mood, I said this last week, I'll say it again. If you're in a bad mood or you irritated or you frustrated or you worked up or you negative in any way, you've reduced your digestive system's ability to get nutrition from the food that you're eating by 80%. That doesn't mean that you can be grumpy and eat junk food. Someone actually mentioned that on a post last week and said, oh, it's the new grumpy diet. You won't get sick. Well, that's not what I'm saying at all. If you are in a grumpy mood and you are eating good food, you're going to lose up to 80% of the nutrition of that food. If you are eating junk food, the junk food's not giving you nutrition anyway. It's just putting poison in your body. So if you're grumpy and eating junk food, you've got a double whammy, and double negative whammy in terms of how your body is responding. Okay, so this week let's be doing chapters 5, 6, and 7. So chapter 5 starts on page 52. There's lots of information, so I'm just going to hone in on a couple of things, read a couple of things, explain a couple of things, tell you a couple of stories to help you to dive into these chapters. Okay, so this chapter specifically about the dangers of marketing to children. And there's some interesting factors that we need to recognize when it comes to marketing to children, influencing children's food decisions, and how they use all kinds of it's a hugely, it's 1.8 billion. I put it on top of page 53. 1.8 billion is spent by the food industry on marketing to children. That's their budget that they have because they know children have something called pester power. And I talk about that on page 53. Pester power. How many times have you, maybe as a mom, or you've been in the shops and you've seen the little kiddies in the cart and they can't speak, but they can recognize a food product because they recognize some cartoon character or something on there, or they've seen that food product so many times that they recognize the food product. And they're screaming for that food product and pester power. It is a whole financial industry, pester power, getting children through marketing to recognize a food product that is junk food and pestering the mother to actually get that food for them. And so, as I said, it's a market. There's another thing I talk about here, and it's called the Bliss Point, and this is used extensively in industrialized food. And the Bliss Point basically it's a terrible thing. They basically bring children into the laboratory as young as 4 You can read about it. I talk about it on page 52, and I put the reference in. Manel Laboratories in the United States is big on this. And basically what they do is they bring children in very young and they give them this little concoction. And this concoction is all chemicals, and it's got various different levels of heated fat, so bad fat. Fat's not bad for you, but when it's heated, it is bad for you. Bad sugars, which is all the separated sugars. It's not in its full, it's like high fructose corn syrup and so on. And then salt that has also been not processed correctly. Okay, and they put levels of that in, and they look for the bliss point, which is the point at which the hormone system of the body is overridden. So therefore, hormones control whether you are hungry and tell you to eat and when to stop eating. That's just one of the multiple roles of hormones, but specifically in diet, that is a huge thing. Your hormones are telling you when you're hungry and when you are not hungry. You may have heard of the hormones leptin and ghrelin, and there's various other ones, and they all work together, and it's not just in isolation. So the bliss point, they look for the point at which your hormones are kind of messed up. So you don't know when you're hungry again, or when to stop eating, and you just keep eating and eating and eating. And I'm sure you've all experienced this when you've bought that really junk food and that packet of chips or those cookies or whatever, and you're sitting in front of the TV and you're not really thinking about what you're eating, but you're eating one after another, and before you know it, the whole packet's being consumed of Oreos or whatever junk food it is, and you don't even full. It's amazing how much you've eaten. You see, the junk food overrides your hormones so that your decision-making ability about when to stop eating is basically messed up. So you eat too much, which means you're going to put on weight or get sick, and then you're going to need medication. So there's a lot of financial benefit for these people that they get you to the industrialized food movement, which is in cahoots with the pharmaceutical industry. Agriculture and pharmaceutical industries are very much in cahoots with each other. And basically, they can get you to eat more junk food, more and more and more and more and more, by overriding your hormone system. They can then get you to spend more money, and then you get sicker, so you need to spend more money on drugs. So it's really a very profit-driven industry. It's not for your health. It's for how much can we get you to eat and how sick can we get you, so you need the medication. And I mean, that is not at all a good thing, as you can, I'm sure you can agree. So the bliss points are, this bliss point is a very real factor that we need to consider. It also messes with your brain. So when you're thinking and feeling and choosing, as you've heard me teach before, you are using your mind to wire into your brain, changes into your brain, and build thoughts into your brain. So when you eat this junk food, when they look for the bliss point, they look for the point at which those pathways of thinking are kind of messed up as well. So you create addictions to the wrong kinds of foods. So, I mean, this is real. This is kind of scary, but it's real. And this is not regulated. These scientists, you can watch some of the documentaries that I recommend in this book, and you can just go on Amazon Prime and look at food documentaries and Google the bliss point and go and watch a documentary on it. The scientist who invented it is very proud of the fact that he actually has worked out a way of overriding the hormone system so that you eat more, and that you eat more junk food, and that your brain wiring changes. Now, this is serious stuff, and this is what's happening to our kids. It's happening to you if you're eating like this. And this is why I say we have to eat real food mindfully. You can't just blindly listen to adverts and go and eat the stuff, or blindly submit your children's pasta power because they're screaming at you in the supermarket. You've got to take responsibility as the adult and teach your kids and yourselves to eat correctly, which is why you need this book, which is why you need this online program, and get into groups and study this. In the online program, I talk you through a 63-day program for thinking and eating yourself smart. So taking all these things and putting them into a nice plan that over the next 63 days, you can get your mind right. And I would work in a group. You'll see it's in the online program, I talk about think, pray, eat. So I take a little section from the book, you read it together, there's some thoughts to think about, there's a couple of little scriptures. If you want to do the scriptures, you don't have to. And then there's some action steps. And if you work together as a group, you can encourage each other and you can help each other, which is so wonderful. So the two work together. You can get both of these in my store, drleaf.com. Okay, so basically this whole chapter talks in terms of marketing. It's designed to, and I'm going to read the heading on bottom of page 53. Gimme, 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 the industry message of eat more, eat more, eat more, trying to literally override your stomach's ability because of your hormones to overeat. So I put just a couple of things that I want to highlight here is that there is supposed to be a board that regulates this marketing to children, but it doesn't really work, which means that there's very little regulation about what our children are being exposed to in the food industry. And there has been through social media, there's a 23% increase in the amount of advertising to children. I mean, this is kind of serious. So I'm just picking up certain points. 70% of all food-related advertising is for junk food. So 70% of the advertising that you see for food-related products is not for healthy food. It's for junk food, stuff that is going to mess up your brain and your body and your mind and your health and all these shorten your lifespan, etc., etc. Okay, so I mean, just in recent visit to a hospital in Texas, I was horrified at what the doctors were eating between surgeries. Going to the vending machine, there was nothing healthy in the vending machine, and then they were bringing the food trays past me, and they were taking these to sick kids with cancer and all kinds of things, and there wasn't one healthy item on the food tray. I stopped them and said, "Where's the healthy food?" And nearly got into an argument with the people serving the food because of the junk food that was on there. When I had to go in for a surgery, I didn't touch the food. My husband brought food into me because the food was not healthy. So you're in a place of health, but you've been given food that is poisoning your brain and your body. Okay, so, and then there's little things like on page 54, I talk about in terms of, do you want vitamin C with that? So it's a heading on page 54. In terms of advertising, what they do is you'll see fortified with vitamin D and fortified with high in vitamin C and great antioxidants added. So you think that you're getting something that's good for you. But actually, industrially, and I'm going to read a little bit, some may argue that many, page 54, I'm reading on page 54, do you want vitamin C with that? I'm just reading a quick paragraph. Some may argue that many of these industrially produced foods are in fact healthy. They're not. Okay, cereals, snacks, breads, they say are fortified, strengthened with vitamins and minerals. And meat and dairy products have reduced fat content, for instance. Now, that's not good. It's not based on good science. You're going to see when we get to later chapters on proteins and fats and things, that when you see that, you need to be very wary. Indeed, we are bombarded with phrases like high in vitamin C and full of great antioxidants, low fat, great source of omega acids. But these are largely marketing devices and supported by what we call very unhealthy scientific reductionism. Now, what does that mean? Reductionism means taking something out of the complex whole and reducing it down to its parts. So supplements are an excellent example of reductionism, and it's not healthy at all. If you think of an orange, it's got all of its fibers and sugars and vitamins all wrapped up in that orange. Obviously, it must be organically produced farm to table, so it's not full of an IV of drugs. I mean, chemicals and pesticides like we spoke about last week in chapters 1 through 4. So here you've got this healthy orange. Now, the industrialized food complex takes that orange and through a process, takes the vitamin C out, so it reduces it, isolates it, and turns that into something that is more processed than anything else. Supplements are more processed than any other food and they're not even real, they're reduced. Now, we know for a fact from research and science, and I'm a scientist, I do clinical trials, I'm all for science, but we get industry, science is not a perfect thing, it makes a lot of mistakes. So we've got to keep on learning, and we've got to also be very careful of how science is interpreted. So when you take something that the science of complexity, where we see that all the vitamins and minerals and fibers and sugars, etc., in that orange work together for you to benefit, it's way better to eat it like that than it is to squeeze the juice out, for example, because you're losing the fiber, which helps you then to keep your insulin levels low. It's even worse to take that out and process it with some chemicals and turn it into a supplement and then add it back to this junk food. That's not beneficial. Okay, so I talk about that in here. So this is reductionistic science, and it's not at all what we should be. I mean, it's like literally we've taken real food, reduced it to this industrialized food complex, added stuff, and now we need a nutritionist to guide us on how to eat this weird food. Let's get back to real food. Real food is, as I said in the first 4 chapters, is natural, sustainable, farm to table, organic. It's what makes you feel good. When you eat a healthy orange that is not junk food, that is not filled with chemicals, you will find that one orange will satisfy you. But if you take orange juice that has been processed, you could actually drink a whole big glass of orange juice that is the equivalent of 6 to 8 oranges with all kinds of sugar added. And because of the way it's been processed, you'll be able to drink much more than you would eat. And that's wrong, because there's nothing healthy in that processed orange juice. And it's got all kinds of things added to it that are bad for your body. That's the one point. The other point is that you could never eat 6 oranges one after another. It would be really difficult to do that, because real food is very satisfying. So you eat less of it because you get satisfied quicker, because it's more nutritionally dense. Whereas if it's junk food, there's like no bottom limit. There's just, you can keep eating, which is what makes us sick. Okay, so let's jump over to page 57. I talk about the supplements. I talk about the fact that the supplement industry is more processed, as I mentioned, than even processed foods. One of the most processed foods. But what's even worse about it is on page 57, I talk about the fact that the supplement industry is not regulated. The FDA does not regulate supplements. So we don't know what's in them, and we don't know whether the health claims that they make are actually real. And then you get told, well, it's safe because you think, well, it's natural. I can take as much as I want, and you're feeling fluey and you take a lot of vitamin C, or the vitamin C in the orange is in a complex state, so your body will benefit from it. But you take that vitamin C out, as I've explained, and it's in some chemical substance, and it's in some processed supplement form, and you take too much of it. Research shows that too much vitamin C in that supplement form can actually cause cancer. So we read that vitamin C fights cancer, but that's in its natural form. If you have it in supplement form and you have too much, it can even cause cancer. This is not something that we can play around with. So I talk about that over there, and we need to be careful. And I talk a little bit about exercise. I'm not going to cover too much about exercise now. I just introduce you to it in terms of how the food industry is focusing so much on exercise to detract from the fact that they're giving you junk food. You must do exercise. It's vital for cleansing out your brain and your body, for doing a million great things, which we'll talk about in one of the next, in a later episode. But for now, be careful of just thinking that exercise, if you're doing a lot of exercise, you can eat what you want. That's not the case. You need to balance exercise with healthy food. In chapter 6, I talk about the fact that we need to be careful of the whole economic prowess and the economic power of the industrialized food movement. It's a very financially viable industry and goes hand in hand with the pharmaceutical industry. I mentioned already, eat the junk food and you're going to get sick. So eat lots and lots and lots of junk food, get lots and lots and lots of medicine. So someone's making money and you're not healthy. So we need to be aware of these things, okay? So there's a lot of revolving door policies and lobbying going on between the food industries and government, and this is not a good thing, and you need to become aware. Knowledge is power. You can't just blindly trust that everyone's got your best interest at heart. The food industry is a very devious industry. It is not regulated, and it is profit motive. Its motive is not for your health. Obviously, there's the organic food movement and the farm to table movement and the slow food movement, all the healthy food movements, which are very much promoting health. But the industrialized food complex, processed junk food, food in a box, the modern American diet, that is profit oriented. It is not health oriented, and it's not regulated by the food industry, by the FDA, I mean. And the FDA, for example, doesn't control the Bliss Point research that's allowed to go on. They're allowed to design foods to mess up your hormones and mess up your brain. They allow that. We got to stop that. We, as the general population, we can stop that by voting with our forks, by voting with our mouths, by becoming aware, by saying we don't stand for this anymore. We're not going to buy those products. We've got to speak up, but you need knowledge to speak up. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm encouraging you to read this book. I care about you enough to spend this time once a week teaching you these principles to improve your mind and your health so that you can make a change in the world. One man can make a massive difference. You don't know the difference that just you changing your eating habits will have on how many other people besides your own health. Okay, so this whole chapter 6 talks about who really rules the economic roost. By that I mean is that this food industry is very, very motivated by profits and not by health, and it should be. Okay, so basically, I talked there about how our stomach has a fixed ceiling. We are designed naturally to stop eating when we're full, and if we eat a clean diet, we will know what to eat, when to eat, and how much to eat, and when to stop. But if we're eating junk food, all of that goes. That your stomach that tells you when you're in its full through the hormones is not doing that anymore. And that's a huge problem. So we have a situation where access to healthier food is very difficult to get. And yes, and more people and more supermarkets and more farms and CSAs, consumer supported agriculture, I spoke about last week. And you can find your local farms, and you can find in some of the big stores now, you can find a lot more access to farm to table pasture raised. Thank goodness. But who did that? It wasn't like that a few years ago in the United States. When we moved here 10 years ago, it was really hard to find healthy food. But because people are speaking up, and because people are not buying as much junk food, they still buy way too much. But there is an awareness developing. So we are seeing more and more and more healthy food products and in the stores. And the more we buy them, the more the prices will come down. I talk about the concept on page 61 of food deserts. I wonder if you've ever heard of that before. A food desert basically, and I'm going to read the definition, millions of Americans, and particularly people in inner city neighborhoods, and that's not only in the United States, this is around the world now in developed countries and even some undeveloped countries, live in food deserts. Which is areas where the local stores within a 5-mile radius do not even carry fresh fruit and vegetables. So a lot of people that don't have access to cars or have to go like maybe 35 or 40 minutes on a bus to get to a store where they can get local farm-produced, farm-raised meats and eggs and dairy and fruits, etc. They're not getting that. All they can get access to is junk food. And they're living on junk food. And this is a real problem. Food deserts are a real problem. I have some really great documentaries in here. There's a great TED Talk I also recommend that you watch by a friend of mine called Ron Finley, who lives downtown LA, and how he talks about how he was so tired of seeing people in wheelchairs, starving, but obese and sick with fatty liver disease and people dying of obesity. And so he literally found the cracks in the pavements in his neighborhood and started growing food and making it freely available, and people could just take it and help themselves. And he transformed areas of his neighborhood into basically like food deserts, into communities where food was being grown in cracked pavements. I mean, this is something we can all do. He got the kids off the street. He got the kids helping to grow the food. These kids there are so many fantastic stories. And I mentioned some of those in some great TED Talks, but look at Ron Finley's TED Talk, and there's a few other people that I'm going to mention as we go along. But there's some amazing stuff happening out there. So do pop to the reference list, which has got loads of pages of different references. Look how many references I've given you. There are tons in here talking about different research studies and TED Talks. And you can go on Netflix, you can Google, and you will find information about food. Okay, so basically, I want to read at the bottom of page 61. I underlined something here that is important. How empowering indeed is the modern food establishment for any of us when the government's policies intentionally make healthy, real foods more expensive by subsidizing the modern American diet. So the modern American diet, which is monoculture, GM seeds, corn, soy, and wheat, etc., and processed foods and all these supplement things, those are subsidized. So our tax money is given to those farmers to grow that kind of food in that way. And they may not even believe in it, but without that, they've got no income, because the smaller farmers are really battling. So they're turning turning all the smaller farms into these huge industrialized complexes. And the more we buy that food, the more we support this, and the more we cripple the smaller family farms that need their income and are giving us really good food. So we need to support the smaller farmers, not these big industrialized complexes. So the government's policies intentionally make healthy, real foods more expensive. We need to speak up. We, the people, need to speak up for our own health and the health of our children. Okay, so there's just to show you how the government gets involved. The WHO, and I'm reading now from page 62. I talk about this on page 62. The WHO, it was in 2003. The WHO is the World Health Organization. And in 2003, what they did was they were very concerned about the rising obesity epidemic. So they put in place a policy that the recommended daily allowance of sugar should be reduced down to just 10%. So 10% of daily calories. And this percentage was based on a conclusive body of scientific evidence on the dangers of excess sugars. And we're going to do a whole section on the dangers of sugar and what it does in the brain and so on, bad sugars, okay, in the human diet. Nonetheless, the sugar industry in the United States didn't like this because they were unhappy. Why? Because it limited the cap on its product sales, the bottom dollar. They couldn't sell so much. So if you got to eat less sugar, they can't sell you as much sugar. And if you look at how much sugar is in things, you'll be horrified to try and bring that there's sugar like in everything. And you should only have 10%, but most people are having 150% too much sugar in their diet. So by capping this, the WHO policy to cap it, to bring it down to just 10%, meant that people bought less sugary products, which means that the sugar industry made less money. So they actually then put pressure on the US government, for page 63, to put pressure on them, saying, listen, we are not going to give you money. And then they put pressure on the US government, who subsequently threatened to withdraw funding from the WHO. So the industry put pressure on the United States government, who then threatened the World Health Organization, saying basically that they are going to withdraw funding from the WHO unless they took that recommendation out. And what did they do? The WHO dropped that recommendation so the sugar industry, could make more money and make us sicker. Well, I don't eat that stuff, and you shouldn't either. So don't support that. Okay, so I talk about the next couple of pages, I talk about how family farms are affected. On page 65, I talk about how we also waste so much food. Every year, the United States wastes 1.3 billion tons of food. We are all to blame for waste. Industry and households combined wasted an estimated 1.3 billion tons of food each year. It's an alarming figure that excludes how much water we waste. Okay, so many sustainable food activists, so that's people that believe in looking after the earth, eating sustainable food, etc., see a direct correlation between cheap food and waste. So if something's cheap, people are wasting it. They don't really care about it. And I give an example, if you only paid $1.99 for a fast food burger or the giant box of cereal, so what does it matter if you throw most of it away? That's a waste of money. That is causing waste. It's affecting the earth. It's contributing to things like global warming. It's a scandal that things are being the amount of waste. It's an absolute. We call it. I actually talk about this being a waste scandal on page 63. Today we could feed. Listen to what I say here on page 63. Today we could feed the world starving with a percentage of the food that is thrown away in this world. From bananas left to rot in piles on a farm in Ecuador, where large numbers of people are starving. So there's piles of bananas. There's nothing wrong with them. They just don't look so pretty. So they just left to rot. When there's people starving, they could give those bananas to the people, and they don't. And this is happening all around the world, and it's huge in the United States. That there's food being wasted that is maybe just a little bit doesn't look as pretty or whatever, and it's being wasted. And then there's bad food that's being thrown away because it's cheap. If you didn't buy cheap food, if you respected food more, we wouldn't waste it. I never have excess in my house. We eat what we need. We buy daily and we eat what we need. May not be the most practical, but you just have to get your mind around it, and you need to just change the way you shop and do things. And that's what I teach you in this book. Okay, so Then basically I say, if you look at page 66, I talk about how there's a lot of really good stuff that's happening out there. In 1970, the Nobel Prize Peace winner, page 66, Norman Borlaug, he often was often referred to as the father of the Green Revolution in agriculture. And basically, what he did in agriculture was that he was able to feed millions of starving people through his work on the mass production of wheat at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center in Mexico. So he was looking at sustainable ways of increasing wheat growth, and that helped to feed millions of people. In fact, my own father, who's no longer alive, was a food technologist in Africa. I talk about it on page 66. And his passion was to marry the traditional bakery to modern technology using local ingredients, thereby supporting the development of businesses in impoverished communities. I'm very proud of what my father did. Really, there's so much we can do if we put our mind to it. Now, in chapter 7, I'm talking about the genetic elephant in the room, GMOs. We hear so much conflicting evidence. Are they good? Are they bad? There's so much in the media saying that the hype about GMO being bad for you is not true. Well, it is true. There is sufficient evidence showing that there's massive problems with GMO. What is GMO? Genetically modified organisms. So this is when people literally, scientists in the laboratory, will literally cut and paste DNA. So they take a gene from one strand of DNA and put it in another to create something new. And that something new could be maybe an apple to stop the apple from bruising, or a type of seed that is pesticide or insect resistant. The problem is that GMO seeds only last for one season, and then they have to be rebought. So there's money in GMO because you have to keep buying new seeds. What is the general principle with a seed that's not GMO? It reseeds itself. So once you've got one, like you look inside a piece of fruit and there's all those seeds. So one piece of fruit has the power to explode in number because it can reproduce itself. But GMO seeds can't reproduce themselves. And this is causing bankruptcy amongst farmers. So farmers are committing suicide. I talk about it in this chapter of what GMO farming is doing to people, forcing these farmers to buy these GMO seeds and forcing them to buy them each year. And it's changing the way that they're farming. It's affecting not only health, environment. We don't understand GMO. We don't even understand how it works. Do you know that we don't even understand 98% of the soil? We're not even sure. So we only understand 2% of the soil. How can we understand what GMOs are doing to our environment? And everyone's affected by them. So you may have a farm over here that has GMO wheat and a farm a little bit further away that's working on agroecological, organic farm, sustainable methods, the correct way of farming. But because of pollination and wind, etc., we don't know how the ecosystem is being affected. We just don't understand. And in fact, if you jump over to page, here we go, on page 71, the environmental, middle of the page on page 71, the Environmental Science in Europe published a paper at the beginning of 2015, noting how there is no global scientific consensus on GM food safety. What does that mean in English? In 2015, the Environmental Science Europe, it's a huge organization, released a scientific paper saying that there is no global scientific evidence that GM is safe. It's globally, many countries in Europe do not allow any genetically modified products. We don't know what they're doing. There have been studies showing the correlation between genetically modified foods and things like autism and asthma and even cancers and all kinds of other correlations with diseases. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know what they're doing to our animals, to our soil, to our land, to us as humans. It's an unknown thing. And please don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-science. I am a scientist, as I've told you 100 times, 1,000 times. I do clinical trials. I have research. I love science. The scientific method. Science means knowledge. We are designed as humans to gain knowledge. I'm giving you knowledge. Studying this, you being a scientist. So I'm not anti-science at all. But we need to, when we don't know what something does, we should keep it restricted to the laboratory. Until we understand what genetically modified stuff does, we should keep it stuck in the laboratory. One of the big arguments for genetic foods is that it's supposed to save, it's supposed to feed the billions of starving. Well, it hasn't done that. It hasn't done what it's promised. It's created more ill health problems, and it has not produced the yields that it anticipated and fed the millions that and curbed starvation. It has not succeeded in doing that. And in fact, agroecological methods they take longer, there's more effort involved, but they produce more crops, and they produce more sustainable crops that can carry on because they seed themselves, etc., and they are nutritionally dense, so they bring health to the population. So with more time investment doing things properly, we have a healthier population. Okay, so I talk quite a lot here about GM, about the fact that you can't look at GM as though the environment's a vacuum, thinking that, well, it's safe in the laboratory, therefore it will be safe in the land. As I said, we can't make that. There's a lot of the scientific papers that have been written about saying genetically modified research is safe have been industry biased. And what that means is that the science and the papers have been, scientific papers have been written and produced, and the science has been done by the actual companies producing the GM crops. So obviously they're going to support their own industry. That's called industry bias. So you can't just read a scientific paper and think, well, this is now the answer. You need to think, you need to dig, you need to ask, answer, discuss, you need to extend your knowledge. So important. Okay, so then I basically go on to give you lots more information about the GM movement. I want to jump over to page 75, and I want to read, we have enough food to feed the world. Okay, one of the big arguments, as I said, for GM foods is that it's the way we can feed the world. Indeed, hunger, and I'm going to read just a little bit, indeed, hunger is not an issue of food production. Today, we have enough food to feed the world. The system that delivers this food, however, is one where millions and millions of pounds of food go to waste on a daily basis. Millions of pounds are turned into animal feed and gasoline for cars. Almost 1 billion people are starving, and 30% of the world's population does not get enough micronutrients. For the first time in history, people are obese and starving at the same time. People are dying younger, up to 15 to 25 years younger, from preventable lifestyle diseases. We have to get in tune with what is happening to our food industry, and we have to get back to basics, and that's why I'm doing this. So continue to read, to study, get the book, get the online program, get a group together, get serious about this, change your kitchen, change your eating habits, change... I'm sorry, I knocked my phone and my excitement there, and Siri started talking to me. Okay, so get into this, be real about it, okay? Be committed to this. As we close off today, I just want to remind you about my conference in December. On the 6th and 7th of December is my annual conference. It's a mental health summit, and I encourage you to go to the notes, the show notes. You'll be able to find where to get the book if you haven't got it, the online program if you haven't yet got it, the details of how to register for my conference. It is filling up fast. It is going to be amazing. It's a mental health summit where we are dealing with, where I'm going to teach you, and I have a team of experts and panelists and doctors that I work with and do research with. We're going to teach you how to understand a new narrative for mental health, that it is not a disease or an illness. It is about what you are going through, and that we are all going through, and about the conditions that we live under and the things that we go through, and how can we find the roots of depression and anxiety. How can we help our teenagers? How can we help our children? And I'm going to talk about food. I'm going to talk about exercise. I'm going to talk about a whole mind component. I'm also going to be presenting the results of my first clinic, one of the clinical trials that we'll be doing this year. That clinical trial starts on the 31st of May, and it is a non-pharmacological intervention for mental health, which means a drug-free approach to mental health. So you can also see about my research, drleafresearch.com, in the show notes, and I encourage you to read it, see what we're doing, partner with me to help me to be able to partner with me to be able to actually do something. I need help to be able to fund this research and to be able to bring inexpensive, good quality mental health technology to you. So help me to do that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you have a fantastic, healthy eating week. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.